How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylei Hobby Time. Every month, my patrons vote on a theme for an art challenge, and this month they chose ships. I'll be showcasing their creations at the end of the video. I'm also taking part in the challenge, and have been asked by a large number of people to build an airship. So I took the opportunity, and that's what I built this week. I went to my local hobby store and I bought this Zeppelin Q-Class airship. I thought to myself, you know what's better than a single Q-Class airship? 2 Zeppelin Q-Class airships. If you're wondering what a Q-Class airship is, it is the one that comes after the LMNOP-class airships. I removed the kit from the cellophane wraps and then I clipped the parts from their sprues. I've never bought a kit from Take On before. I'm not even sure if I said that correctly, but the quality was very nice and the kit itself was sturdy and very pleasant to build. I also made sure to clean up all the mold lines and sprue marks before assembly. To bond the pieces together, I used some plastic weld from Plastistruct. Now, on the box it said that this kit was 510 millimeters long. Without calculating it, that meant very little to my imperially conditioned brain while standing at the hobby store. So when I saw how long it actually was after I had assembled it, I was a bit concerned that it was a little too big. Luckily, the middle section could be removed, which actually shortened it from a Q-Class to a P-Class airship. And it was still pretty long, but definitely more manageable. I then connected the fins and stabilizers and glued the two halves of this flying cucumber together with more of that plastic weld. I then assembled the other one and I moved on to the boat. For the ship portion of this airship, I thought it would be fun to use an American riverboat because I may include this in my Wild Imaginary West. Conveniently, this kit also comes with a single white battleship piece in case you miss something. I ran into the same issue with the boat as I did with the balloon. It was way longer than I had anticipated. So I marked out a spot in the middle of the boat that I didn't think it needed, and I chopped that up with my bandsaw. I then glued the two new smaller pieces of the ship back together before moving on to the customizations. I cut up and added some basswood strips as trim pieces to add a little bulk and texture to the hull and create a visual separation between the top and the bottom. I relocated the boiler from the middle back section of the ship to the front, and I moved the frame that was originally for the gears to the back where the boiler was supposed to be, and I turned it into the bridge. Needless to say, I did not follow the instructions while building this, but I did use most of the pieces as they were intended. Ladders stayed as ladders, railings stayed as railings, but everything was rearranged slightly to fit the new dimensions and additions to the build. I also threw quite a few extra bits and pieces onto the deck to fill the large, flat areas and give some extra character and make it look a little more used. I also added some creeblies and antennas to make it more Wild Imaginary West-esque. Additionally, I added some guitar string as a cable connecting a few of the components together. I also wanted to have some guns on the rails. Gatling guns would have been my preferred choice, but I didn't have any on hand, so I used this little .50 caliber machine gun instead. Next, it was time to connect the balloons to the ships. I drilled 4 holes on the deck and measured out and cut 4 strong steel rods that could support the weight of the Zeppelin kits, which were surprisingly hefty. I then drilled 2 holes in the underside of each balloon and 5 holes into the side of each balloon. The 5 holes are evenly spaced and will be for rods that will hold the balloons together and keep them from wobbling. After I drilled the holes, I glued the 5 rods in place, and then I glued the balloons to each other. I then connected the balloons to the ship, and I also added a cross piece and a ladder to the mast. My wife bought me this cool wire from Korea a while ago, and I finally decided to use some to make some hoses. I cut a small piece and I bent it into a V shape, and I wrapped it up with a smaller wire. Then covered that with heat shrink, and I shrunk it with a heat gun. This hose technique I saw from Cut Transform Glue. You should definitely go check out his channel, he makes some incredible stuff. This hose that I made is to get the gas into the balloons from the boiler, which will allow it to fly. I used the two halves of the extension piece to go over the top and connect the balloons. In retrospect, I'm not really sure I like that addition, but it's okay. I added a catwalk between the balloons, I added some styrene cables, some antennas to the top of the mast, and I also added pieces of the paddle wheels to fill the gaps between the balloons. The last little detail to add before painting were some greeblies to help create a break in the surface texture on the Zeppelins. After the painting, I'm going to be adding a few other things, including the ropes and the rigging, but at this point I was pretty happy with how it looked, so it's time to move on to the base. I bought one of these pre-routed planks of wood, and I measured and marked out 2 holes an inch off center. I drilled out those holes with my Dremel and my drill press stand. I intentionally made the holes just a little too small, so that I could hammer in and pressure fit 2 sturdy steel pipes to act as the standoffs. I measured and drilled 2 corresponding holes on the bottom of the ship as well. I glued the ship in place. After that, I took it outside to prime, and after I had primed it, I brought it back inside and began the painting. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not certain that this ship or any airships will be set in the wild imaginary West, at least not at the beginning. Once you add untethered flight to a world, it expands the scale and changes the way the world works. I like the idea of keeping things on the ground, especially at the early stages of the story, to help develop a more personal, mysterious, and terrifying Wild West from an eye-level perspective. That being said, the Pinkertons already do have hot air balloons, so maybe they are developing airships that they will show up in later. Kind of like the ringwraiths in The Lord of the Rings, switching from horses to fell beasts, which widen their reach and keep them a threat even as the characters spread out over a wider area. That's how I would foresee airships showing up in the wild imaginary West, but for now, they are not canon. We will just call them legends. After applying some pre-shading with the airbrush, I sprayed on the rest of the base coats and I painted on the finer details with a brush. I then began the weathering process by going over the whole thing with a dust color, and I also added some patches to the balloon material using both a brush and the airbrush. I then added the ropes and the rigging using the string that came with the Claremont model kit. I'm not sure how well you can see it on camera, but know that it is wrapped all over the place. Tying the little knots with the forceps and gluing them with super glue was fun, and it all felt very surgical. I gave the ship some final weathering, darkening all of the places where the ropes rested on the balloons, and after that, I called it good. Before moving on to my final shots, I would like to share with you the beautiful works contributed by my patrons, including one I missed from last month's mech build. Huge thank you to all of the patrons who participated in that. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.